Welcome to the Real CP Show. I'm your host, CP. And today's topic, which definitely is a major topic that is continuously going on and is probably going to continue on a extremely fast pace, is anti-Asian American illegal immigration agenda, etc. Question mark. Today's topic, anti-Asian American illegal immigration agenda, etc. Question mark. Right? So is there an anti-Asian American illegal immigration agenda? Determined by who you talk to. It's determined by if a person is utilizing logical analysis, critical analyzation skills, or just using white lie switchery. So some of those things that boil down to those type of things, and maybe some other different situations on that. Before we continue on the show related to the topic, right, comparative analysis, is let's talk about what happened not a long time ago. And so, see, supremacy is the most brilliant mental manipulation force that has ever existed. Let me repeat this again. Supremacy is the most brilliant mental manipulation force that has ever been created and still existing. They are so masterful in manipulation tactics. When people say 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, for numbers of personnel, it seems like such a long time ago. But people can still talk about mythology tales, right? They can talk about mythology tales going back, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. I'm just giving an example of something, right? 3,000 years ago. Just give an example. Can talk about mythological tales. People can take college courses and stuff like that and major in some type of mythological literature. People can sit there and go to colleges and study paleontology, the study of dinosaurs, the study of archaeology and things like that. And most people don't sit there and say, oh, well, that's a long time ago. No, it's nothing. But if you say something about 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, oh, that's a long time ago. But you see, especially when numbers of African Ancestry Native Blacks talk about those kind of things, right? Not talking about sellouts, they can be gone, or deflectionary type ones within the culture. They can be gone as well. I'm not talking about those type of personnel that do no good for within the African Ancestry Native Blacks culture. I say that in the perspective of they just had 100 years ago, about 4 generations ago, right? The Tulsa Racial Racism Terrorism Act massacre of so much of a black town in Tulsa. 100 years ago. They just celebrated that, right? Celebration for that. I don't know why I would point a celebration. You don't celebrate something of black destruction in a town, but that's neither here nor there, right? But supremacy is brilliant. Just like they had the celebration of Juneteenth, but this is not the conversation on that. That's a different show on that one, right? Celebration of Juneteenth, right? That overall, many African ancestors, Native Blacks will not benefit off monetariness next year, year after that, watch. African ancestors, Native Blacks overall will not benefit off that. However, numbers of other personnel will be uh, uh, making quite a number of resources off of that. And still, African Ancestry Native Blacks still get no reparations and still get no laws specifically for them. So getting back to the Tulsa racial racism massacre by racial terrorists 100 years ago, right? Please go ahead and show where, related to the topic at hand, please go ahead and show where there was a black town or an Asian town or an Hispanic town in comparison to Tulsa. Go ahead and show that. Go ahead and show that there was a town that was a town full of Asian Americans or Hispanic Americans, right? And the Asian guy or the Hispanic guy was minding their business inside of the elevator, doing their thing, and a woman from within the predominant culture relays over that he sit there and did this and did that to her, and all of a sudden it was mayhem. And they was looking for personnel was looking for him to sit there and lynch him. So please go ahead and show me where that happened to an Asian guy or an Hispanic guy that started a similar racial riot massacre toward their people, where women were lives that were lost, men lives that were lost, kids lives that were lost, houses that were looted, people getting robbed, and however many countless number of black owned businesses that were burned to the ground. And then to add extremely racial terroristic mentality of warpedness, to sit there and machine gun down the same numbers of personnel in that culture, the black folks. And then to add even extremely extra racial terrorism act that has never been done to another culture relating to the topic of Asian Americans, never been done, where they sit there and flew planes in and bombed so much of that town. They sat there and bombed however much of that town, a black town. They had their own businesses, doing very well for themselves, and you got personnel that was from within the predominant culture on the outskirts could not stand seeing numbers of black folks doing a thing, doing well. Now show again where that's happened to an Asian American town or a Hispanic town, where they did that to personnel within those cultures or ethnicities, because there's no such thing. And by the way, not going to play this little elementary game relating to we're talking about the Asians. Stop, because we're not going to play that. Hispanics, not going to play that game, because again, a person can look very foolish, because you say, what exactly does an Asian person look like? What exactly does an Hispanic person look like, since there are Afro-Asiatic personnel? Yeah, that's right. I'm not one of those type of personnel somebody can play that kind of game with. And what about the Afro-Hispanics? So I'm not going to play that. And just as, again, there are a good number of Asian American personnel, there are a good number of Hispanic American personnel, right? So I'm not going to play that. That's logical common sense. Just like same during time, see, you got many personnel won't talk about, wait a minute now, there's a social hierarchical scale within Asian communities. What you think when you say Asian, that each Asian culture is equal to one another? You can jump into a volcano with that, because they're not. There's a social hierarchical scale, be it within America and be it overseas. There's a certain type of socialness hierarchical scale between numbers of intra-Asians, just like Hispanics. See, people don't really want to talk about that part, because that's really critical, super critical analysis, right? How there are numbers of Hispanic personnel that can't stand other Hispanic personnel, that look down upon other Hispanic personnel. See, people don't want to talk about that. And even present time, right, obviously that stuff still happens, right? And within numbers of Asian communities, right, that have not forgotten what of other Asian countries have done to other Asian countries in conquering them. But we're going to do a shh on that, right? Let's not talk about that. So I bring that up because obviously there is no comparison. There is no such thing as an uh, Asian uh, Tulsa, right? Racial riot. There's no such thing as an Hispanic Tulsa racial riot massacre. But still, you have 100 years later that African Ancestry Native Blacks continuously every week still going through racial hatred of anti-blackness toward them. Continuously. This is not the show to showcase over and over and over and over and over those type of anti-black racial terroristic type of things going on toward them. But I want to make a relay over that thought pattern about the Tulsa, because how interesting is it that still from Tulsa, still what happened after Tulsa? African Ancestry Native Blacks were still going through what? Jim Crow segregation. Could not ride in any bus, could not ride in any train, could not stay in any hotel or motels or anything like that as they wanted to, right? And remember, this is after, for people who don't know, this is after the Chinese Exclusion Act that was in later parts of the 1800s. So even after the Chinese Exclusion Act, that hadn't even, that was still almost a generation later that the Tulsa racial racism riot that happened after the Chinese Exclusion Act. But still, you got personnel that don't want to talk about that, but will bring up the Chinese Exclusion Act real fast. See, that's some old, anyway. See, it's some manipulation tactics on that, isn't it? So, even though African Ancestry Native Blacks are continuously overall just getting so much type of racial racism, terrorism toward them, still no specific policies that's helping them have any significance, still no law specifically for them, and surely no reparations specifically for them. But they just did what a law or laws, whatever, specifically for Asian Americans, specifically for Asians. And again, that is the benefit of certain number of Asians on a certain type of hierarchical scale. But people don't want to talk about that. So regardless, still, it was like what, a month and a half that was passed and went through fast, right? Even though the disproportionate amount of COVID for Black folks is extremely high, right? And at the same time, right, within the last year and a half, still COVID going on. What, did Black pain still stop among African Ancestry Native Blacks by other different personnel? Of course not. Of course not. So you see the hypocrisy that continues to keep going on within the country, because there are people, supremacist people and other people, they can't stand Black folk. They do not want nothing, nada, for nothing for African Ancestry Native Blacks ever. And they're going to use whatever culture they can to come down upon more Blacks and provide them with more Black pain. And they are going to use, unfortunately, what is considered numbers of Asian personnel. Now, it's an insult where about the numbers of Asian personnel that are good, that are not falling for this. But supremacists like, we don't care. Supremacists like, we don't care because they're so small. That's irrelevant to us. It's irrelevant to us, right? Because there's an agenda for that. So I make this point because, however numbers of personnel who know where they are in various parts of media, et cetera, that would talk about, or even among various types of Asian personnel who know who they are. Oh, Black folks are doing this toward Asians. Interesting how the same number of personnel won't sit there and talk about the hatred that has been portrayed or put upon numbers of Black folks by numbers of Asian personnel. See, people, they don't want to show that kind of stuff right there. Various types of political personnel, a lot of times of numbers of Asian organizations, etc., they're not going to talk about that. But they want to make sure to talk about anti-Asian because there's an agenda to that. They don't care about nothing about what Black pain goes through. There's an agenda. Even though what you call Asians, and most people don't ask the question, what exactly does an Asian person look like? Right? Because we just talked about, or I was talking about Afro-Asiatics, but most people don't want to talk about that. That's a very hidden conversation, right? But I bring that point because it's almost like an atrociousness that's not brought up, right? The numbers of Asian personnel that sit there and provide black pain of anti-blackness, but that's not being shown. And again, where's the laws or laws of political policies for black folks, right? That's protecting them from numbers of Asian personnel and other different cultures. See, that's not going to be talked about, is it? Right? So it's like in a book called Propaganda, right? It's a book called Propaganda. It's a very interesting book. And I just want to read just a piece of it in a book called Propaganda on one of the first chapters called Under Organized Chaos, where it talks about the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Let me repeat that again. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. It must, various parts of society must be manipulated with some type of ideologies, right, towards some kind of agenda. And people are utilizing the anti-Asian scenario, right, in various ways, right? Even though you look at the racial demographical, right, context of numbers of Asian personnel in America, and it's still a small representation of demographics. But at the same time, again, and think about what I was talking about Tulsa. Now, if it's small now still, you can imagine how extremely small Asian population was then, and how many Asian personnel wasn't even in existence, not even thought about, right, in 1921. Wasn't even thought about like that, of any significance in any numbers, right? But how many personnel now in present time go on the radar and call themselves people of color minority and then crack up and laugh? How many personnel will then certain segments of Asian population and certain segments of Hispanic population that do that? But you got most people don't have that kind of conversation about that, right? But let me just show something about, since people want to do this anti-Asian type of propaganda and bring up, oh, black folks doing that because they love showcasing black folks, or they see, oh, black folks doing this to Asian personnel, right? But they make sure not to show the other side, right, and show numbers of Asian personnel committing atrociousness toward African Ancestry Native Blacks, all right, showing hatred toward them, right? But let's just see, since we want to play this model minority type situation, and even numbers of Asian persons can't stand that, right? But at the same time, model minority versus people showcasing black folks as criminality. You tell me which one is somebody to let, right? All right, but let's not even go there on that, right? But let's just go over some things, okay? Since people want to do the anti-Asian, right, bandwagon, anti-Asian American bandwagon propaganda, but don't sit there and bring up when Asian personnel have showed racial atrocities toward black folks, right? Nobody wants to really talk about that, right?
What's the issue?
What's up?
Why are you coming over here?
I just want to see what you guys are taking pictures of.
Why is it your business?
Well, you know what? This is my home.
Okay, mine too. Why are you taking pictures
Where
of
do
me?
you live?
I live in Scottsdale. Why are you taking pictures of me?
Michigan plates?
Yeah. Why are you taking pictures of me?
Well, you know what? We've had problems here.
I don't care. You don't know me. Why are you taking pictures of me? And I don't know you. Do you know a lot of white men are doing racist things in this world, sir?
No.
You don't know that? You're not aware of that?
I'm a racist.
You are a racist.
I'm a racist.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay? So
what's
the
your
issue?
point? Why are you here?
Because this is a no zone.
Not really.
Oh, is it?
Not really, sir.
Tell me.
There's not a not zone. I'm here.
Go ahead and try to explain that away. You heard what the person relayed. It ain't me saying that. It ain't me saying nothing about, well, I think this person relayed this or allegedly said that. That ain't me. You heard it. You heard what the person relayed over. But that's not going to be showcased by various types of political personnel and black celebrities and other personnel and Asian organizations and various types of Asian organizations, other personal organizations, or even some parts of black organizations. They're not going to talk about that. Now, it's one thing you don't know about it, then that's fine, but then you know. But there are persons who know about that but want to be very quiet about it. You saw or heard or was told what you heard what the person relayed over, right? They relayed what they are a racist. I didn't say that. You heard what the person said, that they are a racist. That's what they said. And what did he tell the black guy? This is a no N-word zone. Racial hatred, racial hatred, racial hatred, racial hatred. That should have been anti-Asian against anti-black. Shh. And so you got personnel that will say, oh, what are you talking about? That's not all Asians. Beyond common sense, that shouldn't have not to be said. There are numbers of however small other Asians that are sitting there calling out numbers of other Asians in their hatred. But you're not going to hear too much about that, right? Now, to some of the Asian personnel who are doing that, keep doing your thing, right? Supremacists don't like that. And numbers of Asian personnel probably within various parts of your own culture, they don't like that, right? Because there's an agenda. There's an agenda. So you heard what the person relayed. This is a no N-word zone, right? And you realize that if that was a African Ancestry Native Black, American black male that sit there and ran up on two numbers of Asian guys, and he sit there and say, hey man, what are you doing? And went through that same spiel, but it was just vice versa. That would have been probably a hate crime or some kind of oh, that's hatred, another hatred example of black folks doing toward Asians. But see, I know that game extremely well, right? But let's continue, right? Let's continue. Well, that just happened at that moment. That was only a few years ago, by the way. But let's continue, okay? Let's continue.
Hey, listen.
Buddy, I am recording you. You can finish talk to the girl.
Under the contract, yeah, she gave me the money.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I don't know who you think we are.
she have the right to live here.
She
Yeah,
does want to live here.
but
This is what's gonna happen.
Okay, finish talking
They're
to the
gonna call the
police.
police. The police are gonna come here.
Buddy, I don't care if the police come here. They can come. I need the police to come
We
here.
just want to
If you guys did not do any crime, which you guys didn't, then you guys should get the money, right? So we're gonna wait for the police. Because I don't know anything about what's going on. All I know is that you guys came here and asked for money, okay? And that's because it's not like a robbery
what
where you
kind
guys are
of
pulling a
the
gun
police
out.
asked? What kind of
Wanted
gun
to
you
live
have?
here.
I don't have no
You
gun.
guys have a
Oh, I need it.
Actually, my wife sold the gun. Yeah,
What do you say?
I talk. I am with my wife and my
guys,
son. Yeah,
Guys,
they are threatening us. Yeah,
Guys,
so
listen, she's my
I
Asian
think
parents.
they have a gun. Yeah.
You heard that? They're threatening us. They think we have a
Yeah, we have
gun.
that.
That's crazy.
You saw that. For a person who's not seen that before or heard or told, you saw the extreme lie that person relayed, right? Oh, they are threatening us, threatening his wife. And you see the black folks in the car like, they're calm. No one is yelling. No one's doing anything, right? They're filming. Luckily, they were filming. You see the lie that came out that guy's mouth, right? That ain't me saying that. It don't matter what I say on that. You heard what the person themselves said. The outright lie, right? That, they're pointing, you know what word, at them, at the Asian person, the wife, him, etc. Outright lie. That should have been a hate crime from against him. But you know how that goes. Don't work like that. Could you imagine if that was vice versa? Numbers of Asian personnel was in the car, and a black person and his wife and son walking around, stuff like that, and outright lie like that. Wow. National news in this country, that country, etc. Black couple lied on Asian. Look at the anti-Asians. We understand why they act the way they act. Because so much hatred toward them. Supremacy is brilliant. Supremacy is the most awesome mental manipulation force that has ever existed. Or saw that sometime way before, who may have forgotten that. I just want to make sure I put that again in the presentation because it's about also historical timepiece. Because African Ancestry Native Blacks, you better understand there's going to be more of that happening from numbers of Asian personnel toward black folks. It is going to happen. And again, I don't know why I'm wasting my breath on this. Again, there's good Asians and bad Asians. So I'm not going to say it again. That's common sense. Next. See, because you got numbers of Asian persons that don't want to talk about that. And you got numbers of African Ancestry Native Blacks that got the freaking audacity to let people fly on the radar and say they are a people of color minority, while at the same time cracking up and laughing because you saw what this Asian personnel supposed to allegedly did, which you saw yourself, and said. Now they want to play the other part because law enforcement was called, and then the person that's outright lied to law enforcement personnel. Oh, I don't know. I no call. I did. Wow. But see, that's not going to be shown. So you got numbers of Asian personnel that don't want to sit there and have that kind of stuff shown. Numbers of political personnel, politicians. I'm not talking about the very small some that try to do things constructively, but supremacists like we don't care about that because we have our own agenda. We already want this anti-Asian rhetoric going on for some kind of reason or reasons, right? Demographical overtaking, bypassing American blacks because it's already happened economically. It's already happened economically. So they understand they just need a few more percentage points of Asian demographics, and then the African Ancestry Native Blacks, who have been the second largest population for so long, they slid to the third largest population. First was personnel within the predominant culture. Second, then it was African Ancestry Native Blacks, right? And then Asians. Then Hispanics. Hispanics bypassed. They bypassed about a generation ago. They bypassed black folks, which is a different topic, but I'm gonna go into a little bit in half a second. Not too much, because that's the exaggerate part of the show as well. So no laws, no Pacific policies of any significance specific for black folks to help them out. Reparations, just as you help however number of Hispanics, just like you help numbers of Asians, however the situation goes. Gender issues, helping all that kind of stuff, return lifestyle categories, however it go, but black folks can't get any kind of laws, anything specific for them. That American blacks have been the most racially oppressed, racially hated, racially terrorized, of no comparison within America. And get nothing, no kind of justice, no justice out of this, no reparations for this. Do you see the hypocrisy? It's like supremacists sit back and like they're daring African Ancestry Native Blacks to say, make us stop treating you like nothing. Because they know numbers of African Ancestry Native Blacks are going to just keep tolerating that. They don't care about a few percentage points, get mad at that. They say, back in the 50s and 60s, they said, well, we took a little bit more eyeballing to see what was going on. We had to kind of stop that because y'all were getting up there a little bit of fighting back constructively. But let's continue to keep going, right? Since, again, it's anti-Asian, right, by black folks, propaganda. Let's continue, okay?
off me. You know what? Y'all getting a little... I'm a female, so I'm only female. Are you serious?
Yes, I hit me.
No, I did not.
You hit me.
Oh, you getting a whole lot. Get the fuck off me.
Here at 3400 Wilson Boulevard.
Get the fuck off me.
What's going on here?
Get off me.
The address is Misha. It's down at Wilson Boulevard. Wilson Boulevard.
I cannot believe.
1 minute. You're a woman.
Get off me. I was not stealing.
You're stealing.
No, it was not. You checked my purse. Get off. Get.
You hit me. No.
Get off me. Cause you're tripping.
You saw again anti-black by numbers of Asian American person. You are, person could have been Asian American, person could have been, maybe legal, maybe citizen, maybe not, who knows? But you saw the hatred that this particular Asian personnel showed as well toward the black woman. Now, she got reminded that numbers of Asian American personnel don't give a 2 cents about no black woman. They give a 2 cents about them. They said, we don't care because we know that there will be quite a number of still African Ancestry Native Black women that will be still patronizing their shops. Now, again, there are some good numbers of Asian personnel. That's not what I say. I'm not going to repeat what should be logical. See, don't even allow people to sidetrack you on that. I just showed you just a few situations on that. That was hate crime. That was a hate crime. That was a hate crime. That was hate crime. Where was the political personnel? Where was the numbers of Asian organizations? Where was all these different people at? Shh. But they're going to sit there and pass or get the various political personnel and add it with numbers of black political personnel, however many numbers of them, make sure to jump right on board to get an anti-Asian law passed through. Just like that. But number same personnel are act like, anyway, are quiet on trying to get Pacific laws, political policy, specifically black folks. What a hypocrisy. And you got people that laugh at numbers of black folks in political situations. They say, man, many of them ain't worth nothing. Because they're not doing nothing for their own people. Not talking about the very few that maybe try, and you're not going to hear too much about them because supremacists like, we don't care about them. As long as we got the overall amount of the black political figures and stuff like that, black leadership that is down for people of color and minority inclusiveness, but other personnel that didn't even exist in this country a few hundred years ago under people of color and minority status. Man, this game is atrocious, but brilliant. But you saw the guy in the video, he was squeezing that black woman's neck. I thought he was going to break her freaking neck. Now, again, no, the people filming just sitting there watching that. But again, how many numbers of Asian personnel wish they were like personnel within the Padana-based culture? How many? So again, why was that not shown gigantically on media, TV, all over the place? When I have just showed you just only a few examples of these particular Asian personnel that show anti-black hatred. And you still got most personnel that didn't say nothing about that. And for the person who just saw that, you tell yourself, ask yourself, share the presentation yourself, and say, wait a minute now, this is hypocrisy. You saw just only the few videos I showed with very much anti-black by particular numbers of Asian Americans or Asian personnel, because that was one of the personnel is one of the other different countries above the United States, but it don't matter because it still was anti-black by that particular type of person, Asian person, and it's not being talked about. So it's like, let me throw this out to you in Proverbs, in the biblical Proverbs. This is not about religion or context, but I just want to relate this over to you in Proverbs 23:9. Okay, Proverbs 23:9. Speak not into the ears of a fool, for he or she will despise the wisdom of thy words. Let me repeat this. Proverbs 23:9. Speak not into the ears of a fool, for he or she will despise the wisdom of thy words. That's very powerful, right? See, some person within African Ancestry Native Blacks will not heed the wisdom for whatever reason, because black pain is real pain. Black pain is real pain. And some suffer extremely low self-confidence. Extreme low self-confidence. It don't matter how much education a person has. They kind of business all over the place. And how many times numbers of personnel that have black businesses, numbers of personnel in high positions that still got remanded. So it ain't about positions. It is about an overallness of the way blacks are portrayed overall. Just like the thing with illegal immigration. Another extreme, atrocious behavioral agenda. It's very interesting. I'm not going to go into the extreme crisis that's going on at the border right now. I just want to relay over to that part because, again, historical timepiece. So then when this stuff continues again and again, see, numbers of African Ancestry Native Blacks cannot say, I didn't know that. I never heard about it. But regardless, I want to put this as an historical timepiece. Because it's going to continue. Because again, supremacy has the anti-Asian agenda going on full throttle, right? They had a thing, but again, they're not talking about the number of Asian personnel that's committing hatred crimes upon black folks, right? But on that. Oh, by the way, before I forget that, let's talk about statistics on that, on the racial hate crime. Okay, let's talk about that. All right, let's talk about the crime statistics overall. 57.6% of the victims were targeted because of the offender's bias against race, ethnicity, and ancestry. Let me repeat this. 57.6% of the victims were targeted because of the offender's bias against race, ethnicity, and gender. Okay. 20.1% were victimized because of the bias against religion, right? As we keep looking a little bit further, okay, now relating to specifically single bias hate, okay, 48.5% were victims. 48.5% were victims of crime motivated by offenders anti-black or African American bias. Let me repeat that. 48.5% were victims of crimes motivated by offenders anti-black and African American bias. But they ain't gonna bring that up. He said, well, what's that got to do with talking about the anti-Asian? Well, okay then. 4.4% were victims of anti-Asian bias. 4.4 were victims of anti-Asian bias. Compare that to 48.5% were victims of crimes motivated by the offender's anti-black. 14.1% were victims of anti-Hispanic. They don't get no clearer than that. So you're talking about many times more anti-black hatred than anti-Asian bias or anti-Hispanic bias. Almost 50% were against anti-black. how atrocious this kind of thing is not being brought out. But again, you got however numbers of black political personnel within predominant culture, etc., numbers of high number of Asian personnel, etc., that made sure to get that darn bill passed right on through Pacific for Asians. But I said there just showed you almost 50% of the victims of crime were motivated by offenders anti-black, and only 4.4% were victims of anti-Asian. It does not get no clearer than this. It's like a Jupiter-sized slap in the faces of numbers of African Ancestry Native Blacks. It's like this thing going back to the illegal immigration situation. Think about this with the DACA program. I'm not going to go into detail about that. For people who don't know, they can look up DACA. For a person who do know, anyway. So person who do know, I'm not going to go into that. So I would just say the DACA program was something that was done in 2012 that was supposed to help out a certain number of children that was brought to the U.S. Right, by a person's parent, grandparents, guardians, whoever that's brought to the United States, of no fault of their own. That was 2012. It's 2021. What is that? 10 years, basically? Almost 10 years? And you got the DACA program still going? So again, the parents who know, they know that, well, anyway, so they understand that the people who figure out how to do something can get themselves sponsored, or they figure out if they can try to get themselves sponsored by the kids or kids that they brought over here, right? And then get sponsored and try to get that legal status. But people don't want to talk about that. So you got parents, grandparents, guardians, etc., that use kids to bring them over to the country to use them as pawns, right? And that's a certain number of them. It's not for every single one. It's a certain criteria, right? But at the same time, you got all kind of organizations, black political personnel, higher other personnel, personnel with a predominant code, etc., that are doing their best to jump over darn tables, jump over sharks. Anything they got to do is to help out people that are breaking border immigration laws and utilizing children. And say, oh, the detention facilities, oh, they're this. And I was reading something not too long ago, and it was sitting there showing whatever facilities that had nice little facilities, eating real good, very clean, playing soccer. But they don't want to show stuff like that. They want to show ones that, are just fouled up with people back to back. They don't show the other stuff when it's nice and clean. This same atrocious game was done only a few years ago. 2014, 13, don't quote me on that, but it was the same type game they played that. And every so often they play the same game. The kids, and they sit there and laugh and crack up. They're using the darn kids as pawns. Same game. And all that money that sit there and used to house numbers of youth. Right? Where's the money going toward black youth? Right? Some of the most discriminated children in the country continuously, right? Who is looked down upon? Asian kids, Hispanic kids, who? Even though, again, what exactly does an Asian person look like? What exactly does a Hispanic person look like? So I'm not going to go into all that. And certainly, numbers of kids within the predominant culture are not looked down upon like black kids at all. But people can find money and resources to help parents and grandparents and others break immigration laws and put money to help kids that are being used as pawns. And how many of those same number of parents and guardians, etc., never show back at the appropriate time to talk about their situation? They don't even show back up. They sit there and simulate themselves with other family members, whatever they give out, wrong addresses, wrong information. How are you going to find them? Give you wrong names, can't find them. What a game. But people still want to use DACA, right? It was some kind of article the other day talking about how there was somebody that stopped federally new DACA personnel, something like that. Stopped that. And you got people that went crazy, even though it had nothing to do with people that was on DACA right now. But they don't care about that. They want as much DACA as possible because you got people that got atrocious mentalities because they want an agenda they do not care. Border breaking, illegal immigrant, they don't care. They want people, more immigration laws to be broken and laughed at. Because it's about that person's culture, ethnicities, sitting there, arriving in the country, getting freebies. The personnel has a child or children, has some more child or children, automatic citizenship. Not talking about a few people, people go, go across the borders, they do anything here and there. I got all that, right? But you got personnel that are trying to catastrophically, demographically bypass what they trying to just outright just say forget black folks. They're trying to say the heck with them, right? And then wait around for comprehensive immigration reform game, right? They don't care about black folks. They don't care about no black pain. They don't give a 2 cents over their Hakataka tail. They want more illegal immigration personnel to come across that border, right? Because it's about numbers, that person, that culture that know them, want them to be over in the country with them and laugh and joke and crack up. And you'll call numbers, people of color and minorities, and they crack up and laugh, and they know they can go right to certain other places and don't even have to worry about knowing English or don't have to worry about being a citizen or legal and go get free benefits and laugh. But can black American personnel break immigration laws across the border or different places? Can black women just have a child or children, break immigration laws and go to some country or countries, and they're going to give them free type of food, federal program assistance, right? Going to give them free prenatal and postnatal care for the kids, right? No, I don't think so. Are they going to give those kids, black kids, free medical, free dental? Of course not. So you see the atrocity that's being played. But let's take a look at something for a second.
The elected officials refuse to address the problem. The black elected officials refuse to address the problem. My own congressman refuses to address the problem. And I think the problem is black folks see all minorities as allies. And this is not the case. These people are not here for our common good. They're here for their own good. Where I don't have any ill will towards anybody, I also want to look out for my race. I'm a black American. I've never used a hyphen. But I will refuse to turn my back on my race and see what's going on in South Central to my people and let these people come in here and just take over. I'm not going to sit back and watch it. And I
no, who knows whatever that person's doing now. But credit given, right? People give him credit for sitting there saying what he said. Now, if you look at him from the outside, some person else, he doesn't look like a black American, right? But that's what he says, right? I am a black American. And he sold the game. See, supremacists know that there's not going to be that many black folks that's going to talk like that guy and bring up the issues in different countries, different states and different towns. They're not going to do that to political personnel, right? They're not going to do that. And it's not me said that. You already said anyway, you heard them say about numbers of black personnel in certain positions still weren't really doing nothing. So you got the DACA program that people laughing, cracking up that's still around almost 10 years later, right? And they know that they can use those kids to anchor the parent or parents, etc., guardians, etc. They can anchor themselves to that child or children and don't worry about overall being deported, right? What a game. And then to sit there and have automatic citizenship by the 14th Amendment of the Constitution that had nothing to do with various types of other cultures that even exist in the country, had nothing to do with had nothing to do with other ethnicities. But how many people have utilized the 14th Amendment for the various types of propaganda and agendas? I ain't mad at that, right? Because something, that was supposed to be about for black Americans, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, since various parts of the country couldn't stand black folks then and sure can't stand them now, that was supposed to give what overall, finally give citizenship to a child or children of black folks that were born to the country in general already, and give them the citizenship status after the 14th Amendment. And you got personnel that diluted that down like some darn water going down through a river. I mean, water going down to whatever situation, right? The mountains or streams. They said they diluted the stuff out of that. When you got so many people, you allow the 14th Amendment and crack up and knowing it's diluted. When the 14th Amendment is supposed to be about black folks and citizenship. And you got personnel that sit there and can have a child or children left and right and get automatic citizenship. And how many personnel arrive to, that's another different topic. I don't go on all that. When personnel arrive to the country, have that child or children, automatic citizen, and they sit there and take that child back to whatever native country and they have dual citizenship. Understand the game, people. Understand the game. So, and just like, going back talking about the border, in fiscal year 2019, a total of 851,508 individuals were apprehended between ports of entry on the southwest border. Let me repeat this. In fiscal year 2019, a total of 851,508 individuals were apprehended between the ports of entry of the southwest border. And that was fiscal year 2019. And you're talking about the catastrophic crisis going at the border now. And then the nerve of people, you got numbers of African Ancestry Native Blacks that they're fighting for legal immigration rights. That's atrocious. Do you think illegal immigration border breaking personnel give a 2 cents about you? They do not. Because the question is, again, can you break immigration laws? Of course they can't. So you got people that crack up and laugh at numbers of African Ancestry. They laugh at numbers of African Ancestry Native Blacks that can't even see the game that's being used against them. You're gonna fight numbers of African Ancestry Native Blacks are gonna fight for border breaking immigration personnel. Yeah, give me that English as a second language, but at the same time, where are all the African Ancestry Native Blacks demanding from political personnel school districts to teach Spanish as a second language or Chinese as a second language? Shh. Right? Just like this thing called ATSLAN. Yeah, this thing called ATSLAN. For people who have not heard about that, I'm not going to go into detail with that. Just look it up. ATSLAN. ATZLAN. Something like that. ATZLAN. ATSLAN. But I'm going to play you something for a second.
We remain a hunted people. Now you think you have a destiny to fulfill in this land that historically has been ours for 40,000 years. And we're a new mestizo nation. This is our homeland. We cannot, we will not, and we must not be made illegal in our own homeland. We are not immigrants that came from another country to another country. We are migrants free to travel the length and breadth of the Americas because we belong here. We are millions. We just have to survive. We have an aging white America. They are not making babies.
It does not get no clearer than that. You got personnel, and this video was like only a statement. I guess you already saw already how long that was back. It still was the 21st century. And you heard what they were saying. None of the personnel within the predominant culture not making babies. That's beyond for people who know that now even more. And so again, You got numbers of good Hispanics and not so good Hispanics. I've already talked about that earlier, right? Because numbers of Hispanic personnel can't stand other numbers of Hispanic personnel. However, other numbers of Hispanic countries that conquered other numbers of other Hispanic countries are internal, or however it was, right? That look down upon other types of intra-Latin countries. See, people don't really want to talk about that, right? And you saw, again, a person relaying that 40-some thousand years ago. What kind of foolish nonsense is that? There's no such thing as a Latin person 40,000 years ago. There's no such thing as an Hispanic person 40,000 years ago. That's nonsense. You see the nonsense that people spill out their mouths? I'm not talking about the person who relayed it. That's not for me to even say. I'm saying the content that was relayed of saying 40,000 years ago, as if 40,000 years ago, as if Latin was around. Are you crazy? Because what people use as the great civilizations of before was Greek civilization and Roman civilization. So they were not around 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago. So certainly, I won't go into all that. So there again would have been no such thing as a Latin culture or Hispanic culture 40,000 years ago. There would, that's another topic. I don't go on all that. Even with the thing where we're being told what Native Americans are, which is a different thing, a different topic in itself, still wouldn't have been around 40,000 years ago, people. Because then we want to play that kind of nonsense. Then they found bones, in the Americas that went back to black. So I'm not going to play that. Okay. So again, let me play one last thing since, we're talking about legal immigration.
Illegal immigration is not only a burden on our environment and our population, but also our wallets. Especially in tough economic times, an additional financial burden is difficult to handle. The annual cost of illegal immigration is estimated at $113 billion to our nation's taxpayers. A proposal to allow illegal aliens permanent access to U.S. jobs makes no sense when you recognize that this would keep many current U.S. citizens from getting jobs. Not only can illegal immigration limit U.S. workers' job opportunities, but it can affect their income as well. Illegal immigrants are often paid less than their legal counterparts, leading not only to exploitation, but a lowering of wages and working conditions for everyone. Households headed by illegal aliens imposed more than $28.8 billion in costs on the federal government in 2009 and paid only $9.5 billion in taxes.
So you see already, this is not, and you see this is still 21st century. That what I just showed you. And so you got personnel that try to play this game and say, personnel, they pay this and pay that. You say, well, whatever you say, right? Because again, somebody comes across the law illegally and had that child, free maternity, thousands of dollars, right, for that child, for maternity, labor costs, right? And then you multiply that when a person has second and third or fourth children, et cetera, and then you add in free federal program of food for what sound like to be good to take care of the kid, but at the same time the personnel broke immigration laws because they know they get that free federal food assistance, right, up to 5 or 6 years old, right? So they're set with that, and they know already they go ahead and get some this other free federal assistance situation for years and years and years and years and years, and not to worry about trying to become a citizen or legal or anything like that. They can sit there and sit back and laugh and have a good time and get that money and never paid anything to the system. And you got people that try to have the darn nerve to act like that people pay more to the system than they're getting out. Are they crazy? How are they gonna explain the major illegal immigration crisis going at the border now, right? And you're gonna tell me some personnel are paying more into the system? You already get what I'm saying, right? That makes no logical sense, right? personnel breaking border immigration laws, and they're laughing at numbers of African Ancestry Native Blacks that don't know the game. And they're laughing at some other personnel from different other cultures. Because when it comes down to it, it is about a cultural competition, and people can play this cultural inclusiveness all they want. There's a piece of reality to that overall, but at the same darn time, when it comes down to overall, is cultural competition. So I hope this was an interesting show. Thank you again for personnel who will be listening to this presently and in the future, because this is an historical timepiece. So when things continue to go even more, be it border immigration, personnel breaking border immigration laws and laughing, be it even more catastrophic demographical changes, right? Then, personnel can't complain, because again, that's how I wanted to put this in the show. And, if nothing else, if it's just one person or two people, 10 people, 20 people down the road over 5 years, if it's 100 people and they have not heard about some of the things I've said, or maybe forgot about some of the things that were talked about, and they reminded them, oh, I forgot about that. Then I've done a good situation on that, because it is about historical timepiece purposes. So when people try to play games, generation from now, 5 years from now, 4 years from now, 8 years from now, play the illegal immigration game again, right? That's already been played. When more demographical overtaking economically, demographically against Black folks, it's in a historical timepiece on my show as well, because it's heading that direction, and it will happen. Demographically overtaking of African Ancestry Native Blacks by numbers of Asian is going to happen, and supremacy really wants to happen, or close enough, because they don't need to really bypass it, but eventually they will bypass overall, or get as close as possible to bypassing African Ancestry Native Blacks. Then once that happens, then it is beyond game over for numbers of African Ancestry Native Blacks. And in actuality, it's already pretty much over it now, because African Ancestry Native Blacks only have half a generation to one generation left, because there are too many internal problems. There's too many external problems. There's too many demographic problems. There's too many economic problems. There's too many health problems. And supremacy, the most awesome mental manipulation force ever existed, they know that. So thank you for tuning in to the Real CP Show. Thank you.